Welcome to Philly Cocoa presents Side Project Spotlight, episode 42. This is developer's journey into making cool stuff. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Cocoa, a Philadelphia-based CocoaHeads community focused on Apple development that primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, and watchOS development. Philly Cocoa's two desires to take you higher on your own developer journey.
So close. So close. Oh man, almost did it.
There you go. I mean, I was on a roll for 5 episodes, and this is the first one that's just
yeah. And of course you have to mess up when we're gonna have a special guest.
Of course.
Today.
But this is a very special guest. We
Yes,
haven't talked to him in such a long time. Do you want to do the intros, Steve? Or
intros? I mean, this man needs no real introduction in the iOS developer community. I'm gonna make sure I embarrass him as much as possible before I bring him on. And I met Joe, I think, through Philly Cocoa, and he's a prolific developer. I'm gonna butcher his name, Joe Cieplinski, I think. So we're gonna bring him on. Say hello.
Hey everybody.
Hey Joe.
So Joe, terrible at intros.
So we know Joe from Philly Cocoa. He used to come to a good chunk of our Philly Cocoa in-person meetings back in the day before you were mostly based in New York at the time, I remember, and you would take the long trek from New York to Philadelphia. You'd come down through, was it Amtrak or New Jersey Transit? I forgot which one. Or even the Chinatown bus. That actually would have been the easier route. And then he'd come by and hang out with us at the Apple Store and sometimes do some great presentations. Joe is, I remember Joe from his collaboration work with the Bombing Brain crew, who created, is it Tim and Gene and Joe had all co-developed an iPad app called Teleprompter at the time, and a few other things. I think Setlist.
Is it Teleprompt plus or something?
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, we started the whole plus trend before anyone else was there, like a decade before Apple started using it.
Now everything is a plus. Everything.
Yeah, but was it plus or just plus?
It was just plus.
We even have it wrong in our notes.
Oh my goodness! We're off to a really
ancient
really
history. Yeah, I mean, it's okay.
I went looking for the app the other day.
Yeah,
I was like, I think it still exists somewhere, but it's not really updated.
Yeah, it's there. We haven't done much updating to it lately, but it is still there on the store.
Yeah, that's cool.
And you also built a timer app. So I guess maybe I should actually ask your iOS developer journey, Joe, so you can get the people who don't know you.
Yeah, let's let the guests speak for a change.
All right. We do ramble.
So yeah. I mean, my Philly connection is that I actually grew up in Philadelphia and moved out to San Francisco sometime after college, and that's when I got contact. That's when the whole iOS thing happened, and I got contacted by a couple of college buddies of mine, high school buddies really, who began also college, Gene and Tim, and they were looking for a designer at the time, and I happened to be doing some design work. I had quit teaching by then. And so I started working with them, mainly on Teleprompt Plus, but then we also had another app called Setlist. We had a few other things throughout the years. And so then when I moved to New York from San Francisco, I actually went back to the East Coast. They invited me to come down to the Philly CocoaHeads because I was going to the New York CocoaHeads here and there, but I didn't really know anyone in the area up there. And my folks still lived in Philly, so it was like, why not just come down on the bus? Yeah, mostly. I took all three, Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, and the bus, but mostly the bus. And I'd come down. It just became habitual after a while. You all were so welcoming, and it was such a great meeting that I started coming pretty much every month, and I started showing up more often than a lot of the locals. So I became kind of a staple. It was my excuse to get a cheesesteak once a month. I did a couple talks here and there, and then also just enjoyed many other talks and hanging out with y'all. And then after that, or just before the pandemic, I moved to Boulder, Colorado, which is where I'm at right now. And so I had to stop coming to the Philly meetups. But I think it was like literally a matter of months after I left that you all had to shut down and go virtual anyway. So I actually showed up to a few of your virtual meetings, but not that many, unfortunately. And yeah, that's kind of where we are now. So
how are you enjoying the Rocky High life?
It's pretty awesome here. Yeah. The weather is turning again. We had a nice long winter with a lot of snow, which, our friend Curtis really enjoys, but I don't. Yeah, it's been a long winter, but now it's starting to get pretty nice. So, looking forward to the weather now from this point on.
Now, I vaguely remember you when you first decided to do iOS development, because when you joined, when you did the teleprompter work, a lot of it was design work and UI work, and then eventually you got curious enough to just do iOS development on your own time, building your own apps. I was wondering if you can kind of like describe that journey, and tell about some of the apps that you have built.
Yeah, like so many things, my friends Gene and Tim at Bombing Brain really encouraged me. I was, as a designer, I was constantly asking them, like, would it be hard if we did this, or how would this work, or how, I was constantly worried that I was designing something that was going to be very difficult for them to pull off, and so I always wanted to know like how much work or what was involved in building this or that. And there was one point where Gene just said, you're really curious about this. You should just learn how to do the code yourself. And I know myself well. I know that if I dig into something like that, I need a project. And so like, I can't just read a book. I tried a couple times, false starts of just reading books or watching videos. And there weren't as many tutorials back then as there are now anyway. But what finally worked for me was like picking a project. I made this little aspect ratio calculator because I was tired of trying to figure out like, well, this image is 200 by 386. What would it be at 500 by whatever? It's just cross multiplication, right? But it was a super simple app for me to build for myself, figure out how things worked. I had no idea how view controllers worked. I had no idea how to store anything. It was like the worst, possible app that I coded at the time. But it was a great learning experience. And from there, I just kept building more and more of my own small project apps until sooner or later, I ended up doing more development work than design work. And now I consider myself primarily a developer. So I do design still, but not nearly as much as I used to.
Wow. And you were a teacher, right? Before all this too.
Yeah. Shakespeare, high school English.
Nice. So you went from teaching English to high school kids to designing apps to building and designing apps. And nowadays, what is it you're up to? Are you consulting?
Developing apps, yeah. Working with a company now called Polywork, which is pretty awesome. They're kind of New York based, but really all remote. Pretty much every company's remote now, except for Apple. Polywork is a pretty cool platform. It's kind of all about your digital identity. People put themselves on LinkedIn as professionals, and then they go to Twitter or wherever they're Mastodon to go be themselves personally, and then they've got other sites. If you're a designer, you got Dribble, and so this is more like collecting all those identities, and the idea is basically you're more than your resume. You can express yourself in any way you want. So it's a pretty cool company. I just started working with them very recently, and doing some iOS development for them, and that's actually been great. But yeah, I've been a consultant working for various companies for many years now, and like I said, primarily making my living with development work rather than design over the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I think that's a really inspiring tale because, first of all, I think you said this before in meetings that there's always a need for people with good design skills in the space, just like a desperate need. But also, I mean, we've met people at Philly Coca events who, like, they're hesitant to try to go into it. They don't think maybe they can do it. They come from a non-computer science background or something. But we're like, hey, man, look at this guy, Joe here. He's like way more successful than all of us. He was an English teacher. Come on, anybody could do it. No, so it's it's true. Anyone can teach. Anyone can teach themselves how to program. It's like it seems way more mysterious than it is. It's not that it's easy, but anyone who up for the challenge can do so.
Yeah, I think as long as you have that wire in your head that is, it's okay with the computer making you feel like a moron for 10 hours. As long as you eventually figure it out, and that 11th hour feels awesome.
And that never ends.
Yeah, that never ends.
Yeah,
so, but that part of it. And then the other thing I would give credit to is all of y'all, like everyone I hang out with, I always got along better with developers than the designers anyway. Designers, again, this is just in my experience, they often were trying to hide their knowledge and they didn't want to share anything because, it was always like you're in competition with people. whereas developers to me are extremely generous in general. We're always willing to, tolerate my stupid questions, make me feel all right about asking them. And so it's just a lot of listening and a lot of asking of questions over the years. And still to this day, I mean, there's so many times where I'll just ping somebody and be like, how the heck do you do this? Or have you ever worked in this API before? And I never get go read the manual, you idiot. It's always like, oh yeah, I did that once, and they usually point me in the right direction. So it's just a great community for that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I came into the Philly CocoaHeads community some years ago now, and I found it very welcoming too. And that's where I think I met you, right, Joe? Yeah, we didn't encounter each other before. I can't remember though if I was listening to your old podcast release notes before or after I met you. I don't remember exactly, but I think before, because I think I remember someone's like, "That's Joe Cieplinski," like the guy who does release notes podcast.
Well, one of the guys.
Release notes, and shout out to you, Charles Perry.
Yeah, Charles. I love that podcast. I listened to every episode. I went through the whole back catalog when I discovered it. Mm-hmm. It was fantastic. It
was a great podcast. I was kind of sad to hear that you decided to let it go. I guess it was more like it was time. You said all the pieces you needed to say, and maybe
one of the things is we put this thing on ourselves where we're going to do an episode every single week, and we did it for like 450 episodes.
That's really hard.
Okay, that's a lot of weeks in a row. But we're not letting us, and we would once in a while record 2 ahead of time so that we could take a week off here and there. But that was us. No one else was demanding that we have an episode every week, right? But it got to a point where that just became such a streak that it's like your rings. You don't want to stop doing it once you get a streak going. And then it felt like it was time for us. But after all that, like it's still to this day boggles my mind that anyone was willing to listen to us just kind of babble for a half hour every week. But people tell me all the time they listen to the show, and I thought we had an interesting angle on it because we were always talking about business as opposed to straight up code.
That's why I really got hooked on it. Wasn't it anything but the code or something like that was your tagline?
That was our tagline. Yeah. Anytime we mentioned code, someone would say, "Hey, you're not supposed to talk about code." In this show.
But I mean that's why I gravitated to it too, because there's way more involved in successful like app development, especially than just the code. You can learn how to code something, but what about the business behind that product, or the marketing, or the support, or all the other things you talked about on that show?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of fascinating because it did reflect the journey, very similar to like core tuition in that regard of just like you had to pivot in a lot of ways in certain different angles of like going from like a paid model to a subscription model, and you both in terms of like apps. Whereas I think in Charles' case, he went from was it Meta? I forgot the term, the app that you had. Yeah, Meta, and then he went to the sort of account software SaaS.
Like an accounting portal or something.
Right.
How I think of it.
Yeah, he shifted it completely away from iOS and into web, which was an interesting transition. I thought that sprouted some really interesting conversations. Yeah. And the more we talked with kind of SaaS people, I thought that was really valuable info for the iOS world. But in a lot of ways, that sort of limited our audience. I always called us the Eat Your Vegetables podcast. we're the ones telling you these are the business hardcore things you don't want to do. I know all you want to do is play with the code all day, but this is the stuff you have to do if you want to succeed. And so there were just a lot of people I think just aren't interested in that.
I thought his journey was particularly fascinating in the sense that he would, there's a lot of like cold calls. He would talk about sort of like his particular audience and the market research he had to do around that audience. And in the case for you, the sort of the networking that you had to do, you would look into different areas that were outside of the iOS community because what you were building wasn't necessarily like the iOS community would help you in terms of building the stuff, but not necessarily like marketing and selling and ultimately championing your app to bigger markets and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. I felt like there were a lot of industries that had way more experience than your average iOS developer, with that stuff. So it was always fun trying to find more interesting angles. And we ended up branching out beyond the podcast and doing a conference. We ended up doing 5 of those. Right. We actually just came back from Portugal a few weeks ago. We did sort of an unconference. We post pandemic, we had stopped just before the pandemic. We decided not to keep going that following year. We did a show in Mexico and it was amazing, but we thought like, okay, we have to see what we're going to do next year. We decided to take a break, and then the pandemic happened. So it came out to be perfect timing. But now that that's sort of not really gone away, but at least a little easier to travel and such, we invited some people who had been to past release notes to come to Portugal. And we basically did a non-conference where we just had a bunch of friends, people who had been at the show, mostly European friends, but a few Americans showed up as well, came to the show. And literally all we did was hung out in Portugal for a couple of days. It was really awesome. We did a few touristy type things and had a nice food tour and hung out. And it was actually a really, really cool experience, and no talks whatsoever. It was like my ideal conference. It was basically just hanging out with.
That sounds like a vacation.
How was that even advertised? Was it just like within your newsletter? Because I don't remember even seeing it.
Yeah, we only
about it.
It's because we weren't invited.
Yeah, I know. I'm subscribed to your newsletter. All right, I'm subscribed to your newsletter.
Yeah,
I'm still there.
I thought I was subscribed. Did I get knocked off?
Yeah, we haven't sent the newsletter in a long time.
Yeah,
but no,
exactly.
it was like kind of because it was a first year an experimental thing. We did kind of it as an invite only past people who had shown up at our conference.
Mm-hmm.
So just the people, particularly who had been to the conference before.
I went to the first several. I didn't go to the Mexico one. I couldn't afford to go down there, but and then that was the last one you did before this one you're talking about?
Yeah, Mexico was the last one we did. That was more of a traditional conference. Before
that, it was Chicago, and then Indianapolis.
Yep.
For that, so those were really fun because I'd never been to either city before.
Yep.
And so the Chicago one was remarkably well timed because the weather was perfect, if I remember correctly. Like it didn't rain constantly, like you might expect it to, or something like that time of year. That was great. And I'd never been to Indianapolis before, and I was amazed by how large the streets were and how empty the city was at the conference time. That was really cool, though. These conferences were really impressive. You guys did an amazing job, and the venues were very interesting. The talks were great. I had a really good time. Really good time.
Yeah,
and learned a lot. So.
We always tried to make it interesting and try to find really good speakers. Again, not your typical people that you necessarily had heard of, although we'd always have a few of those. But it's also a huge undertaking. So that's why this time we were like, I don't feel like dealing with speakers and flights and
it's
scheduling and everything else. So it was more like, let's just go to a city. Because we wanted to hang out. It had been years since we had hung out, since we stopped the podcast. I used to talk to Charles every week. I joked with him. I'm like, I talk to you more than I talk to my own brothers. So it was like, this is pretty crazy and weird. And so we just hadn't hung out in a long time. And I thought like, well, what if the four of us, us and our wives show up in a place like Portugal or some cool European city and see who else wants to come with us. That's sort of how it shaped up.
That is cool.
It was very successful. We had a great time. We will probably come up with some way to do it again. We'll see. But we're already talking next year. Maybe we'll come up with a new city and do it again. So I'll make sure you're on the list this time. You should have been. I don't know. Did you change email addresses or did you register with some weird address that maybe?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. But then again, like to be honest, I have not been to any of the release notes. It's one of those like I'll get to it, and then 3 years goes by. I'm like, oh wait.
Yeah. I never went to WWDC, and now that ship sailed.
The only way I'll get to a conference is if I run my own.
I know, yeah.
Which is how Cocoa Loves happened, but that's beside. That's a different story.
That was my introduction to Philly CocoaHeads.
Yeah,
was Cocoa Loves, and you were there, right, Joe?
Oh yeah, I went to all the Cocoa.
Yeah, you went to that. Maybe that's where I first encountered you then, because I remember that's how I went. I remember the. I know we're supposed to be talking about Joe here, but it's like a slight tangent to talk about Cotro's because I didn't have anything to do with the Cocoa Love conferences. Like I was never involved in organizing them. It was like I joined kind of right when they were happening. I went to them, and I remember seeing it advertised and thinking like, "What is this? This seems weird. This looks interesting." And it's in Philly. It's like, "Oh, I'm gonna buy it." And at the time, it was a lot of money for me to have put down for a conference. Even though it was quite affordable as conferences go. Yeah. And I'm glad I went because I got introduced to Culturo and to you and Curtis and everybody else in Philly Coca. And look, and now I'm on a podcast. So like life's looking up.
Sure.
But no, I do remember. I remember listening to Joe here on the release notes. And now we're talking to Joe on our own podcast. So it's like life is funny that way. And it all started because Culturo and Curtis made a conference called Cocoa Love.
That's right.
That was mostly Curtis.
Yeah.
Curtis
but you made the really cool illustrations.
I wouldn't do it.
That's right.
Oh yeah, that was hilarious.
Oh my
But
god, that is so
actually,
much
that's a
work.
good segue because we're hardwood sideways. If you haven't listened to our podcast, you'll realize we're hardwood sideways. But this is a perfect one because those portraits were all done with a program called Procreate
Mhm.
on the iPad using the Apple Pencil. One of the things that I really liked about that is that at the time when the pencil came out and I could draw on the iPad, it dawned on me that it was literally like a Wacom tablet.
Mm.
I think it was like 11-inch Wacom tablet that had higher refresh rates than a Wacom tablet at the time, and it cost about the same, but you had all the power of iOS underneath it, and you can build stuff on top of it. I mean, technically, you could build it with one of Wacom's version with an Android version, but it's not the same. And plus, I'm an iOS developer, so it just felt more comfortable. And I remember people at the time were like saying, "Oh, this is just an overpriced iPhone." And I thought of it in like a lot of quote unquote content creators. I hate that term, but you'll get the point across. That these people looked at this as like, no, this is a cheaper pro hardware, and it's malleable. It's not. It can be a music recording app, music making app, a video app, video recording app. If you wanted to use LumaFusion, if you wanted to make some beats, if you wanted to draw, if you want to animate, if you want to storyboard, it's great for all of those things. You literally are a mobile production studio. And that's what I thought was really powerful about it. It's particularly from the point of view of just being able to sketch something on an iPad on a regional line somewhere, right? Just to have that time to be, I always think of it like I always think of like riding a bus or driving as a waste of so much of your personal time, right? Imagine how much time I can, what I can do productively with that time. And I'm not even talking about work production, but just like my own satisfaction of making something, which is what I love to do. I love to just make stuff. I don't care what it is ultimately. If it's food, if it's drawing. But so I kept thinking like, one of the reasons why I have you on, Joe, is because I know that you are a champion of the iPad as a development environment at the earliest, and almost from the jump. So I was wondering if you could describe why you were thinking that at the time, and then where you are with it at this point in time.
Yeah, the iPad's been a strange journey. I think like it was the most successful product I think in electronics history. Right when it first launched to getting to like 1 million sales, I think it was faster than anything that ever happened before. And obviously, you had the iPhone that came before it, and it was like whatever Apple makes next is going to be hotcakes, right? And when the iPad was announced, though, for me, I mean, this is where Teleprompt Plus came from. We were literally, I remember I was still in California. I was working literally across the street from the Yerba Buena Center where they announced the iPad. So I was like, I was at work like when that announcement was going to happen. And I remember talking to the guys about like, what are we going to do with this thing? Whatever, all the rumors had been out that there's going to be some kind of tablet. We didn't know what it was going to be called or how it would work. And would it have its own operating system or would it just be a big blown up iPhone and so on and so forth? And I remember us just racking our brains and saying like, we better come up with an idea for this thing because it's going to be a big deal. And that's when I actually had the idea for set lists. It was I as someone who amateur musician, you can see my bass tech here. Every once in a while I get up on stage and I'll sing a song and I don't remember lyrics worth a damn. So I thought like, what if I could have like a little prompter for my lyrics? And that app actually became Setlist later on down the line. But I made that suggestion. Like I'd love to have, just a big screen to be able to see my words while I'm performing. And Gene had the smart idea of saying, well, how about just a general purpose teleprompter instead? Like, let's not limit it to musicians. Let's talk about the much wider field of teleprompting. And that's when we decided to go full forward. And we were at like, that first launch day of the iPad. The first 50 apps or whatever that were approved, Teleprompt Plus was one of them. So we were literally on App Store day one of the iPad App Store. And that was just an amazing feeling, like to be waiting in line, at the Apple store. And as soon as, you get your thing, you take it home, you open it up. And the first thing I wanted to do was download my own app. And we almost didn't make it into the store. Like we got rejected. It was funny. I think we had to submit our apps like the Friday before or a couple of days before. And we got rejected, and we just thought, oh crap, I guess we're not going to be on the store day one. And then so we just gave up. We didn't realize like you could resubmit. And so we actually got, it was the one time like someone from Apple actually reached out to us and said, what are you doing? Resubmit. Fix it. Like there was one little problem, go fix it.
Do you remember what it was? That was the problem?
I don't remember what Tim would have to tell you. I forget what, it was some kind of weird technical issue. But anyway, we resubmitted and we made it in time, but it was pretty funny. But so yeah, from day one, like most of our success as a company was from the iPad. And I just felt like the iPad to me has always been Apple's kind of most personal device in that, you're literally touching your data, your content, and you're manipulating it with your own fingers. And there's something about that that's just way more visceral than a Mac could ever be. Don't get me wrong. I'm on the Mac all the time. I love my Mac. But I'm always looking for more excuses to use my iPad. It's always like my favorite of my devices. The Apple Watch is amazing for health and all the ways it can help you save your life and all that other stuff. And I'm going to wear it every day for that reason. My Mac is how I make my bread and butter. But the iPad is the device that I like using most. That's the one I'm drawn to, if that makes sense. And so I'm always looking for the iPad to become a more useful, more interesting device. And, in all the ways that I think it can be on its own. Steve Jobs famously said in that opening announcement that it's not a Mac and it's not a phone. It has to be able to do things that neither of them are good at, right? Or at least not. It has to do some things better than either of those. It can't be a half-assed way to do your email, and and like a slightly better way to do this thing on your phone. It has to have certain characteristics. And one perfect example is Procreate, right? Like drawing is obviously way better on an iPad. I don't know if you've ever used apps like Ferrite for audio editing. I was actually editing.
I tried before.
Yeah. I actually ended up there are limitations. We'll get into that, like the software and what's holding the iPad back. But like for me, it was so natural to take a pencil and just like grab the exact spot of audio that I want to, scrub out, like things like that, like feel more natural to me. Which is why I'm really excited about the Logic and Final Cut announcement.
Yeah, I was going to say, I used iMovie before a bunch of times, like before I started doing Final Cut for stuff, and on the iPad, like I remember, and on the iPhone as well. And I had the same kind of feeling. Like, yeah, it was a little bit awkward because it's the smaller screen and whatever, but it also feels very natural to be like, here, I want this here and here. I'm using Final Cut on my Mac, and I'm just like constantly frustrated because I'm not used to it, and it's intuitive, as they say, but not really. If you have not used it before, there's like little tiny buttons with little symbols. You have to know what they are, and you have to like hover over the iPad. It's kind of works like you expect most of these apps. You touch it, and you can move it, and you can figure it out by trial and error, I think, pretty easily.
Yeah, and all you have to do is give an iPad to a kid and give a Mac to a kid,
exactly.
And you'll see instantly how much easier it is, right? Yeah, from an intuitive standpoint to touch your software. Whereas, the mouse, we're used to it. We've been using it for 30, 40 years now, so we know how to use a mouse. But every time I see like an older person who's never used it before, or like like people who've never touched a mouse before, it's not as like we forget how hard that was to learn.
Yeah, and all the metaphors involved with a desktop computer, they still confuse people to this day.
They still have that save.
The save icon.
The save icon is a 3.5 inch drive disk.
Well, and that's the thing I liked about iOS in the beginning was that Apple did a really good job, I thought, of like kind of abstracting that away. And basically, for at least beginners on the phone, one of the successes of iOS is that it's very, very easy to figure out compared to a Mac.
Yeah.
Now, this is where the waters get muddied, right, with the iPadOS, because Apple finally did break off their operating system. It's technically iOS. They call it iPadOS. It does have some capabilities that iOS doesn't have on its own. So I feel like that we haven't seen yet the fruits of that particular split. I think that gave the iPadOS team a little more leeway to hopefully get more creative. Some of the experiments they've been doing, things like Stage Manager, every time they try to tackle multitasking in any way, shape, or form, I feel like it's not quite there.
Yeah.
And they're trying to make the iPad more powerful, but at the same time, it's losing some of its ease of use. Like I can't hand it to my dad anymore. Like, it's getting to the point where it's not doing, again, it feels like they're trying to make it a Mac or they're trying to make it a better phone. and they really need to get back to just making it an iPad. And that's why I'm excited to see apps like, I don't know if you've used Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator on the iPad.
I have not. I didn't even realize it was on.
briefly.
Oh, wait, it was on there. I do remember it.
Yeah,
but
I'm not
never used
usually one to praise Adobe, but
Yeah.
but honestly, the UI experiments, what they've been doing is actually really interesting. Like how they're trying to rethink their interface as a touch interface is actually pretty cool. And they're coming up with some interesting tools. And it does take a learning curve for someone who's been using Photoshop forever. But once you get used to it, you start saying, "Oh, okay, this is better, and it is more easy to manipulate this stuff." And like, actually, I can do vector icon work pretty easily now, even with Affinity Designer or a number of different vector icon apps out there. I might not do a really complex illustration the way I could do an Illustrator on my Mac, but I can do quite a bit of basic. If I have to like create my own custom SF symbols or stuff like that, it's pretty cool to be able to draw. On the iPad.
Wait, is there an easier way of doing it? I did that. I did a custom SF symbol on a Mac, and it was like, it was not easy.
It's tedious because it's a giant SVG, and you have to have like 27 different drawings with all the right
exactly. I was like, what?
That's not gotten any easier. Like I don't know why someone hasn't built an app yet where you just draw the damn symbol once and then draw.
I'm just saying,
yeah,
business opportunity.
I didn't even have to. I didn't even have to draw it. I was just trying to take like an existing image. Even that took like 15,000 tries of tweaking to get it to work right. Yeah. So yeah, they could work on that story, as we say in corporate IT speak.
I keep pitching these wonderful ideas on these podcasts.
No one takes
because, not because that I want to build it and make money off of it. I just want to consume it. I just want to use it.
Yeah,
I don't want to do the work to actually make it.
Well, and at least this is an idea that actually has some legs, only because like designers are willing to pay for software, I find. Mm-hmm. Whereas I would never build a developer tool just because they always think they can run their own better, and they can't, but they think they can. Mm-hmm. And like it's just getting them to pay for anything half the time. It's like there's not great customers, but I do feel like designers they'll throw money at a problem if it saves them time. The SF symbol thing is it's not great. I've been doing them recently. And it's just way more work than it should be.
Although once they exist, I love them. As a non-designer, and I just need good buttons for things, I open up that app and I just search for stuff. I'm like, that's good.
Yeah,
that works. Sometimes it's perfect. Sometimes it's good enough, but it's definitely better than anything I'd be slapping together myself in Photoshop or whatever.
Well, and knowing they're in the system is great because then it's just like I'm not, nothing's going to happen to that asset. It's going to get upgraded, and stick with it. And
they keep adding capabilities, so it's really cool.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said about handing that to your dad, an iPad. I remember my mom bought it, and the internet bypassed her basically.
Right.
She never touched a computer, or she tried to. She's always tried to. So she tried Windows 95. She's even tried a Mac. Nothing really like clicked with her. Not even an iPhone, for that matter. But it was only when she bought an iPad. I don't know why. I think maybe she got like some kind of deal on it or something, like an iPad mini. And I never saw anybody like gravitate to the technology and learn it as quick as she did. From going from scratch, like literally having no concept of like a web page or like anything like that, to being like doing her bills online through her bank website. Which sometimes I'm like, okay, just gotta watch out for these little creepy people. You don't want to be, you don't want to be scammed. So that kind of stuff. So, but but it was amazing to me because I had given up completely on any hopes that she would ever learn how to navigate the space. But she's on YouTube. She's watching Netflix. She's playing like video games that I never thought she would ever play. Pretty much all, and then she went, of course it's like the gateway drug because now she has an iPhone and all those things, but like
Apple appreciates your business.
Exactly. And I didn't even do any promotion, which is my thing.
No, but it worked. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, I've seen this from children. My girlfriend has some kids, and the youngest child is really into the iPad, and she does things like the standard stuff. She searches for cat pictures, but she's also interested in using the pencil now, using Procreate to draw things and try to be creative. I know she was working on some kind of story with some people, and I think she might be interested in illustrating. I'm not sure, but like there's so much you could do. I remember during the pandemic, my girlfriend and I we were trying to do some kind of like events and things. We did like a class. It was like a like a paid class, but for kids to come out, because we had this like kind of outdoor venue going on, and they would come out and they want to learn how to like choreograph a dance, because she's a dancer, and then I was helping them to make a movie with it, and we were all using like Apple devices pretty much. So they had iPhones, and I brought out like any Mac I had or iPad stuff, and they used them to film it, to edit things together real quick, and they made these choreographed dance numbers during the pandemic times when you couldn't do anything, and they had a lot of fun. And we were doing this in like the freezing cold. It was like winter. I think one time we were doing it like outdoor heaters, because you couldn't be inside buildings at the time. And it was remarkable, like what you could do with very little instruction, just like basic concepts, basic like how do you use some of these tools on a Mac or an iPad or an iPhone, and the kids really took to it and were able to create some really cool stuff. And I think it's a testament to how well designed the core concepts in Apple's iOS product, even Mac, but also specifically about iOS and iPad. Like the concepts have really stood the test of time, I think.
Yeah, and that's what I worry about with the iPad, because as they try to make it more powerful and more appealing to pro users, I feel like they have a tendency to they think that more powerful means more complicated, right? It doesn't have to be. There are a lot of professionals who don't really love technology. They just love doing what they do, right?
So like so many like that.
Yeah, it's supposed to get out of the way and just let them do it. Now that's the other thing that kills me. A lot of people think, oh, there aren't any pro iPad apps. I'm like, well, that's because you're not, they're like, yeah, there are no development apps. There are a few of them, but not.
There's no Xcode for iPad.
Yeah, there's no Xcode. But like, I think a lot of developers in our community feel like until there's an Xcode for iPad, the iPad is worthless. And I'm like,
no way.
Like talk to anyone who basically stands up for their job. I always joke, like any job that requires a clipboard, that's an iPad.
Yeah. So my favorite music venue around here is Broken Goblet Brewing. It's in like Bristol, and they have a great. It's a brewery, but they have this big stage and lighting, and one of the owners controls it all from an iPad mini. He walks around, he does like the sound adjustments with the bands, and does it all from his iPad mini during setup. It can adjust it live wherever he is during a night. It's neat, and that's the kind of thing. When iPads came out, I started seeing that being used that way, like almost immediately. Like everywhere where you could hook up like Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connection to that iPad, use it to control things in an environment when you're walking around like that. It was a perfect device for that. It had just big enough screen, you could do it.
Didn't they do that for the Mandalorian set?
The virtual background?
Yeah.
It's all control with remote device. I don't know if they're iPads or Android devices, but they're controlled with tablets.
Probably iPad. Right?
Yeah, but and that's the thing. Like in places like I'm not going to bring my laptop to a bar. You know what I mean? Like beer spilled on it. It's like it feels precious. Whereas the iPad, like I used to bring it on stage all the time, and I got stuff spilled on it so many times.
Yeah. I mean,
so like you wipe it off and move on. It just feels like a more rugged device. Especially you pop it in a good case or something, you're good to go.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, and there's just, like I said, so many jobs you do standing up that you just can't use a laptop for easily.
Exactly.
So and that's what I mean. I feel like the more Apple can concentrate on, and like they keep trying to tack on multitasking, and honestly, I don't want to multitask on my iPad. It's only a 13-inch screen, and I got the big one, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, like I full screen, like I have a MacBook Air, an M2 MacBook Air, like that's a 14-inch screen, and I full screen most of my apps on that laptop. So like I don't need as long as I can switch between apps easily, like I don't need them both to be on the screen at the same time too often, right? There is some benefit to drag and drop and stuff like that, but like honestly, like I don't know, to me it feels like they keep chasing that like the be all and end all is like the ultimate multitasking scheme, and I just don't feel like that's the answer. It's much more like give it more RAM, give it more speed. Like you can never have enough power, and then like the software has to come. And that has been coming slowly,
I think the one of the design changes they made to the iPads following like the iPhones, they got rid of the button, and that was such a core design element for iPhones and iPads for so long. And when that happened, even to this day, the lack of that button causes some confusion with people who are not super technical. Like and Apple, it's like it's advantageous for more of a power user. Like I like it. Once I got used to it, like even on an iPhone or an iPad, you can swipe and move around faster. It feels very fluid. But I've seen the struggle where it's like I just want a button to hit to go back home. Like how do I get back home? How do I like why is this app not working? Or the same thing on the Apple TV where they do the same kind of like at the swipe kind of like to close the apps and stuff. That's it's kind of a mysterious to people. I had to go over and fix an Apple TV at my girlfriend's house once because like for days they couldn't use I think Netflix because they had some error. They didn't know how to kill the app.
If you talk about the Apple TV, the most hilarious thing I will do if like something hangs on the Apple TV is I just unplug it.
Yeah, I know. Like really, that's what people do. And you can't unplug an iPad though, it's actually dude, it's actually difficult to turn off an iPad if you tried recently. I have an iPad Mini, one of the newer ones, and I'm like, how do I shut this down? Like what's the button combo now? And what I found the easiest thing to do is go into settings and there's a shutdown button in there. Like I mean, but yeah, they change these things, but the hardware has really evolved and kept up. Now you can get they have M2 chips in them now, right? Or is it still M1s? M2s in some of the iPad Pros, right?
No, I think
or
it's
is it just
still
M1s.
I can't remember.
Well, it's one of those. They're super fast. So
right.
and the at least the high end iPads are as capable.
We're doing it live.
We're doing it live. They're as capable as a laptop is.
Yeah,
the software, as you're saying, is still lacking.
It is an M2. Okay, yeah, no, the only thing that was been lacking for many years on the iPad is RAM. But they did that whole thing now where if you get like a 2 terabyte or a 1 terabyte iPad, it can swap its storage for RAM, basically like the old RAM disk back in the day. But since it's flash, it's really fast. I'm thinking that's how they pulled off the whole Logic thing. Because to me, virtual instruments and all that stuff, Logic should to me, it should be a perfect app for an iPad, honestly. And I'm really glad they're finally shipping that. I wish I could get my hands on it, but it's going to be another week or so before we get a hold of it. But like I'm going to be playing with that instantly because if I had that back when I was had that back when I was doing release notes, I would have recorded all of our stuff right on the iPad.
I'm so excited for them, even though I don't have an iPad Pro. I'm like, I should just budget for get one now. Like I want to get a giant one. Like Apple is making me seriously consider spending umpteen dollars on a 12.9 inch iPad that I don't actually need.
I have a 12-inch, and sometimes I regret it because of how heavy it is.
Not if you use Final Cut, you don't regret screen real estate.
No. Not if you use Final Cut. But then at that point, like you're really using it in a much more state, like just like you would use it for a Wacom tablet. The value add for having something of a large screen like that is that it covers more distance. You can draw on much more wide strokes. In the case of Final Cut or Logic, you had just much more real estate to work with, right? And so, and a lot of times you're putting it on the table when you're doing like you're doing it on more solid ground versus like if you're trying to do it like holding it, then I think that the weight begins to strain a little bit over time. But as a point of topic about sort of development for it, right? Like this is where I thought like there's a market that is, I feel like, just beginning to like bubble up to the surface, right? It's always been sort of like I always view like the Mac App Store and the iPad App Store as like this sort of like untapped opportunity for developers.
I always thought it was a ghost town, but that works better. Untapped market opportunity works better.
Well, that's the point, right? Like there's nobody there, so why don't you put your thing there? I mean, I get the whole like I want to have like much more freedom, and that's fine, but like they're doing like if nobody's there, guess what? You're still being presented to millions and millions of users potentially.
It feels
you're right. The irony is that there's more apps than there ever have been, but most of them are the same kind of app. They're all games trying to catch whales, right? So like, or they're free to play games, or they're free to do whatever. You know what I mean? Like there is this kind of empty space for really useful pro level apps or like professional apps, I would say. But you have to be willing to, like, the thing that App Store will not do for you is market that app. It's going to be lost on page 60 of your search term. So you have to go through the marketing and get people to go find it and buy it. But that opportunity is there. And I think there are tons of little holes in the market that no one is filling yet. And like I totally think that it feels like I don't know how to. It feels like the web is on its way back in. Like it was really like I remember we were chatting about this earlier today. Like in the the web world in 2000, everyone was telling me, oh, no one's ever going to make an app again. Forget it. It's all over. Everything will be in your browser. And I was like, really? I don't think so. But then the iPhone happened, and I kind of put a pause to that for like a good solid 8 to 10 years. Everyone had to make apps, right? And like, it was like the heyday of like native and go hire a designer and everything else. And I feel like now we're starting to swing back towards the web again. And it's like, maybe this is one of those things that just keeps ebbing and flowing. I'm not anti-web. I'm just saying that like, it feels like Apple is, as good as SwiftUI is, it feels like they're losing people to like the whole idea of like native developments is losing its steam in a way that it shouldn't be, right? Like I feel like Apple really needs to push that and evangelize their tools better, because SwiftUI is a lot. I mean, I could build an app way faster.
Yeah,
get it to 80% at least.
I mean, I agree, but part of the problem is I know we're trying to stick to iPads, but part of the problem is Safari WebKit does not have the same functionality that Chrome does, and Chromium does it, and that's what a lot of web development is focused on. So like the platform we're on now doesn't work with Safari because of just what it supports.
The streaming platform
the streaming platform we're recording this with doesn't support it because of I guess because of something that Safari doesn't support. That's what everybody's like that. All the platforms that do video online tend to not support Safari very well. And
yeah, well, part of that is Safari might be missing a thing or two, and that's Google's whole bread and butter is making Chrome like dominate the universe, right? That's why they forked it in the first place. But the other side of that is lazy developers who only want to test in Chrome.
Yeah, so that's true. That's very true.
There are a lot of websites that don't work in Safari for no good reason, like just because
I agree.
They don't spend the time
and
to make it work.
You could talk to my bank website,
dude. Okay, so what I don't understand is that there's so many of these that don't work with Safari on the Mac, but work with Safari on iOS.
Of course.
And you're like, aren't they virtually the same code base? I thought. I don't know. Maybe not.
It's just that their customers have iPhones and they don't have a choice there, because their customer can't. You're not going to get a customer to download Chrome on their iPhone, right? It's just.
I mean, if you did, it's still not Chrome engine yet.
Yeah, it would still be the web. It would still be a glorified web view, right?
Yeah.
Right. At that point, you really are just using Safari anyway, right? Yeah.
But the iPad Pro app market, to go back to the topic, I was thinking about the Final Cut and Logic, and I only saw their videos, but what I want from Pro apps on an iPad is I want, as we were talking about earlier, a more intuitive way of doing things. So, like if you're on Final Cut, you could hit a keyboard shortcut real quick, like B or something, get the blade, and you can click it with your mouse. But what I want to be able to do is kind of just do it like I naturally like. I want to just like slice something, I want to just move it. I want it to be inertial when I move. I don't know if it works like this, but I want to be able to I want to zoom down to the end of my by flicking. I want to zoom to the end of my track, and then I want to just like cut here, and then have it delete. I want some simple gestures that feel like I'm working with a piece of digital, paper or something. For some of the type of stuff I would want to do, and similarly for Logic, like Final Cut and Logic, I feel like I have no idea if they did this, but if they really thought about the way you actually work with the virtual concepts and the assets, they could really make something that's super usable, like maybe more usable than a desktop version for some people.
Or at least for some tasks, right?
Yeah,
there
some
might be very specific things that like editing this particular kind of vocal might be easier on the iPad, right?
Give me a podcast editing app, a video podcast editing app on an iPad, so that I don't have to use Final Cut and spend like 100 gigabytes trying to make a simple edit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I hope that that's the reason why these apps took so long, right? And I hope that's why Xcode for iPad doesn't exist. Like if you look at Playgrounds, right, on the iPad, you can see them kind of making that steps toward like I can draw like simple SwiftUI animations now with my iPad, which is kind of cool, right? I can't you can compile a full app at this point, but it's not one that you're gonna you're not gonna add core data to it and do anything heavy duty yet. But you can see that they're not just porting over a Mac app. They're actually trying to rethink, how do we input, how do we what's easier when you only have your fingers, and you can make some assumptions about people having keyboards with iPads these days, but you don't want to necessarily rely on that, and you do want to take advantage of that touchscreen. So I do hope that, we haven't seen it, like I haven't actually gotten it in my hands yet, but I'm hoping that the Logic and I'm hoping that the Final Cut versions show some real innovation there in UI. Like I said, Adobe's been doing a great job with it, honestly. And I'm not usually one to say that, but like, what they've been doing with Photoshop and with Illustrator is actually quite cool. And actually a number of other companies, I shouldn't just give it all to Adobe.
Well, how about photo, what, not Pixelmator anymore. It's Photomator, right?
Pixelmator. Yeah, I don't know what they're calling it now, but yeah, I mean, another great app that did a lot of innovative, cool things. You know, like
the Affinity guy,
and especially as we get more and more, you know, AI sort of oriented type stuff where a lot, like the computer can do a lot of this stuff for you. I feel like just being able to draw a circle around the person you want to erase and just let it erase that person.
Exactly. And that kind of tools, I feel like a lot of them work really well with something like an iPad because you can just do those simple gestures, and you can also very quickly just talk to it to put in text. Like if the text to speech gets better or the speech to text.
I feel like the iPad creates a lot of opportunities for even stuff for like production quality of like I like to do game development, as you know, as like a hobby thing, but like it's, you know, toughest thing of building any 3D game is the assets. So either you do it yourself or you go to the asset store, you download like some stock assets. It'd be really cool if I could just, you know, like if I want to do a 3D model of this mic, and I could just take my iPad, just scan it, use CreateML to create a photo is it CreateML? I forgot which framework does it, but to create the 3D model from the photos that I've taken, and then I have an instant 3D asset. Or if you're a product person, you have a plant or some Etsy clothes or something. You want to just create a quick 3D rotation. I mean, you can do that now. It would be great to have just a service to do that. Even could be like Etsy could do that for them, right? Just have that built into their app.
You know, I wonder if the iPad might become a more important creation device if the Apple's rumored goggles, whatever, come out at WWDC next month. Because no, think about it, because if AR becomes a thing that's successful in the Apple ecosystem here, right? You need good tools to build it. And as you're saying, sometimes having something you could physically manipulate, move around and scan things and touch and manipulate them like with your fingers, you know, like that might be a better way of developing certain kinds of assets for that type of software work. So maybe having an iPad will become a regular thing even more than it is now with developers, their laptop and their iPad, because they're doing AR work.
Oh, you were about to say something to do, or?
Yeah, no, I could totally see the goggles being just like you were just saying, like going around a circle and taking pictures. Like, what if you didn't have to have something in your hands? What if you were just looking at the thing as you went around and it was taking photos for you? You know, and I think it's really intriguing, your idea of the goggles along with the iPad as a companion device. Like, how well will these integrate together? Right, the way that the iPhone and the Apple Watch are sort of like really tied together, right?
Yeah,
it'd be kind of interesting if you can do a lot of cool stuff with the virtual reality, like if it could augment your iPad experience in some way. I think that, you know, the rumors of this have been around for so long, and obviously it feels like they're finally ready to actually announce something. I do feel like it'll be more like the Apple Watch, where it's like they don't know what it is yet, and they're hoping that we'll figure it out. But I do think it's going to have some surprises. I do think there are going to be some things involved with this that I'm just not thinking of. Like, I've never been a virtual reality guy. I'm not much of a gamer. I'm a casual gamer, if anything. Like, I just don't see that whole mixed reality. Like, now, if you give me a pair of glasses like this and tell me, like, when I'm walking down the street, I can see whether that restaurant's open, or you know what I mean? Like, and then, like, directions would actually show up right in front of my face with arrows and stuff. That would be amazing.
Yeah. That would be
but I'm not going to wear big virtual goggles down the street, right? So this is
unless you're Curtis.
Yeah,
maybe really like a ski goggle.
So yeah, right. You use
for him.
Use the rumored $3,000 goggles as ski goggles,
but and you break them the first time you fall. Yeah.
that brings us
the moment he hits another tree. Shout out to you, Curtis. GetSlopes.com.
I said we weren't going to do that anymore. Too.
I know.
We literally had that conversation before this started.
I can't help it. Joe's here. Yeah. It would be a shame if we didn't.
That's true. That's very true.
Old habits die hard.
Die hard. But that brings us maybe we can wrap up by we're recording this. It's not WWDC yet, but it's coming up soon. Is there anything you're expecting, or do you wish on the iPad side will come out of this, like iPadOS or hardware or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping for. I mean, last year the big thing was Stage Manager, and it didn't really kind of work out. I don't know anyone who's really using it on the iPad. It's kind of a shame. I hope that they're not just. Oh, I'm sorry.
I technically use it for
Okay.
certain situations. So, like, if I'm trying to stage manage my different content, my different like resources while I'm like for research purposes, like if I'm trying to like create a story or something like that, I might like organize stuff in certain ways, like my reference images here, my websites here, you know, in different sort of ways like that. But aside from that, no.
Yeah. Well, I hope that I guess my hope there would be that they develop it further rather than ditch it and start all over again like they've been doing every time.
Yeah.
Like I'm tired of them trying to figure this metaphor out. Like just stick with something you have and keep improving it, right? But yeah, I would like to see iPad become more powerful. I'd like to see, you know, how much of what development went into Logic and Final Cut. Like how much of that would that reveal that maybe they can give us some APIs to do some really cool stuff that we can't currently do. It'd be cool to see stuff like that. You know, but yeah, in general for the iPad, I just want more software. I want more independent companies building more interesting apps for it. And I think, you know, it's not a matter. I mean, yeah, Apple can always make things easier for us, but like make the development of those things easier. You know, obviously SwiftUI is going to get better. Hopefully they will, you know, developing together with Mac and iOS, you know, and iPadOS in particular. Right now, it's kind of a bit of a mess with a lot of if-def statements where it's like, if you're on the iPad, you know, do this button, you have this done button, but you don't need that on the Mac. So, you know, I'd like to see further collaborations there because, like, right now, like if I start building a brand new app in SwiftUI, you know, the Mac version always suffers because it's always my last afterthought or whatever. You know, like because there's so much work to do to get that working the way you expect it to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, honestly, that's like the big thing I'm always hoping for is just small incremental improvements in the APIs that they give us so that we can build better software.
Right.
As far as what Apple announces, obviously the big thing is going to be this goggles thing. I don't think we'll see much other hardware, maybe this 15-inch MacBook Air, which is not an interesting product to me, but I think, you know, to me, the whole point of an Air is to make it small. I would love to see a return of the 12-inch MacBook.
Yeah, the little baby MacBook.
Yeah,
I
like
remember
put
that
two
thing.
USB-C ports on that thing.
You had one of
like
them. Didn't you have one of them?
Yeah, I would love to have an even smaller laptop, honestly. Maybe we'll see a 15-inch iPad eventually. That'd be cool. I don't think there's any reason why an iPad can't get even bigger. I think the 11-inch is the magic size.
Just keep getting bigger and bigger.
I always joke, I want the biggest
though?
iPad possible, and I want the smallest laptop possible.
I mean, remember Microsoft had that the first thing they called a Surface was actual table. It was a literal table touchscreen, and that was actually it was janky as all hell, but it was cool. I got to use one before.
I think my artist friends, I know at least 3 off the top of my head who are like super into, like they make their living off of iPads, doing their art on the iPad. So like if they found out there was a 15-inch iPad, for sure they would be on. That would be a day one purchase.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to try to build apps for the iPad, your target should probably be, as Joe was saying earlier, professionals, people willing to spend money because they're making money with the hardware and with the software. And that's the hard part is finding that niche. If only there was a podcast or something you could listen to for ideas about this kind of stuff. Maybe something related to notes of some kind.
There were two. There were 2. There was that and the underwear people.
Underwear? Oh, the underwear people.
Underwear.
Oh God! I'm gonna have to put a link in the show notes just so people understand that reference.
What was the name of that one?
Think about how good a secondary monitor a 15-inch iPad would make for your Mac. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, our friend Zorn uses his 12.9-inch all the time as one of those.
Yeah, with Sidecar. You know,
yeah.
And that's the other thing. I'd like to see more of that collaboration between devices. Give me more reasons to have these multiple devices. Like I said, it feels like it's going to be a big year for the watch, and maybe, you know, this might be the year it finally goes independent. You won't need an iPhone to have an Apple Watch. I think that would really break through. Like there're probably a lot of Android users who would use an Apple Watch if they could. I feel like that's coming eventually. So there's that independence angle, but I also would like to see more of, you know, like handoff, like these little things that Apple gives us that we take for granted now, but they're amazing. They are. It's like I'm working on this thing right here. And like, even I could just put down my iPad and like I have my mouse here on my Mac and I could just mouse right
So,
over to it.
yeah,
The continuity camera. I'm using my iPhone right now. For
me
my camera.
too. That is so amazing. Again, my girlfriend's not technical, so that's why I bring her up a lot for this, because she is like a perfect demo for Apple, because this continuity camera lets her use the iPhone as a camera. I tried to get her to use like Camo, which is like really good software.
Yeah.
And all, but she was like, "This is too confusing." She was messaging me, "How do I turn on the camera? How do I get it to work?" And I was like, I went and I upgraded her Mac, and I just like, how does continuity camera work? I don't know. You just kind of put it near your screen, and it just kind of becomes available.
Right.
It works. It's like pretty remarkable. I was like,
there's never much to do.
It's beyond awesome. Because if Apple's never going to ship a good camera in their laptops, at the very least they could do is just let me use my phone, right? Because it's the best camera on earth. It's sitting on my phone. Those little things is always what those little surprises to me are always the fun parts of WW that kind of get overlooked. But they're conveniences that you start using regularly, and then you forget that you ever didn't have them.
Yeah, I got and the what do they call the magnetic thing on the iPhones?
Oh, MagSafe.
MagSafe, yeah. So I didn't have MagSafe till this year. I got like the latest iPhone, and I have on the top of my monitor, my ancient Apple monitor here, I have one of those little stands they sell in the App Store from Belkin, I think.
Yep.
And I just have it like attached. I had this clamp thing I had since the pandemic, right? When you couldn't get cameras for anything. It's awful. It was like barely would get big enough to hold this massive phone. I'd be slipping and hitting my finger. I got this thing. I'm just like, click.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And these little things, and you can put it on a tripod. And like these little things, they seem maybe at first to be gimmicky or something, or just a mild convenience or something like that. But once they're integrated into your life, you start using them, and you're like, wow, now the difficulty of setting up a good looking camera for streams or podcast recordings, or whatever, is so minimal. I might as well do it. Why not?
Right.
And that makes a difference in then the content, the stuff that people create.
Can we come up with
content?
a better term?
Gotta have a better term than content. I hate it too. I hate it so much. Right. AI and content creators.
You're right. You're good at coming up with a better term than this, right? There must be something better we can call this.
You asking Joe? I'm not good at
asking
it.
Joe.
Joe might be good at it.
Well, speaking of content, this is the one thing I would love to see for the iPad that currently it's different from the Mac OS. Like, there's nothing the iPad, like, it's got an M2 chip in it at this point, right? So it's as powerful as your Mac is. So I don't understand why iPadOS still can't do like audio for multiple apps at once. So in other words, I should be able to take a phone call with Skype or whatever technology I want to use, Zoom. I should be able to record it with a different app. Right? Like, that still isn't possible. I can't plug in a microphone to my app, and like record a podcast. Like, that should be that would make the ultimate portable rig for recording. I fly to Philly and we actually do this in person. Like, I could bring an iPad mini and that could be my entire device. You know what I mean?
I would love that, and not have to go get, like, I was considering getting one of those Roadcasters, because you could plug in all the microphones and do all the mixing and stuff like that. But honestly, if you could do a lot, I mean, you obviously need hardware for microphones and stuff, but if you could do it all on an iPad instead of something like that, that would be way preferable.
Well, honestly, even the microphone in AirPods is actually pretty decent now. So like, you know what I mean? Getting over the wireless latency, there's like issues to be tackled.
Yeah.
But I feel like that there ought to be an app for that, and like no one can build that app right now because there's a limitation in the OS.
Audio routing is not great. I remember years ago they did something to improve audio routing, because I was doing guitar at the time, and there was like, they had done something, it was a long time ago, and that allowed you to like have the audio route between two apps. Something that I can't remember now, so I should stop talking. But but it was not what we need. It was not like full on multiple inputs and elaborate routing or anything.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I wanted to do, and when I was because I was trying to build an animation drawing app.
You'll get it. You'll get it working eventually.
Eventually,
I believe.
I had a great prototype using PencilKit, but one of the things that I want to do was like have it plugged in through USB to a monitor and to be able to display a preview, so that you can show it off. You can show it off on a big display. But then
can you do that?
You can. I think there is a way to do it, but I mean, it's not like those are the type of things where, like, as a developer building for a pro app, like, I know that that's something we would the audience would really love,
right?
Whether wireless or wired, but that would be the kind of thing where I would want to develop I would want to develop stuff like that. Like, just I remember talking with you before you went to Colorado, to Denver, Joe, and I was like, the next damn app that I build for myself it has to make a studio, it has to be for like, it has to be something, not just like a portfolio app, a glorified portfolio app. It has to be like a pro style app. And I wanted to build it for the iPad. But
Pencil Kit just hasn't been updated enough.
No, and that's the thing. Like, it hasn't been updated for like at least a year, like significantly, at least 2 years. So
this is the year. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, they added that whole thing where you can hover now, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I know what you mean. Like, there's that's the problem with Apple. They run so bare bones, and this is why they don't have layoffs, right? But like, they'll take the people who are on the Pencil Kit team and move them over to something else for 2 years, and that's why nothing happens to Pencil Kit, right? So
I mean, I'm not asking for anything. I just want the flood. I just want a flood fill feature.
Yeah,
that's it.
Without like trying to build it yourself from scratch.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that
exactly.
I'm hoping that, like, in the development of Final Cut Pro and in the development of Logic, they were like, well, here's this limitation, and they went and talked to the OS team and said, like, it'd be kind of cool if we had this or that, and so maybe this year we'll see improvements to the OS that came as a result of that development. And this is why it's really important for Apple to build first-party apps.
Yeah.
Not to dominate the market per se, they usually will, but it's much more about like just opening up or eating their own dog food so that they can see exactly where the holes are in their abilities. And so I'm really hoping that in the development of Logic, someone on that Logic team had to go to and say, why can't I do multi-app audio routing? And like just fix that. You know what I mean?
Gonna,
like if that's an iOS 17, that would be amazing.
We're gonna put down the bingo card, Kotro, for WWDC. Multi-app audio routing.
All right. On the bingo card.
On the bingo card, yeah. I mean, I just want to be. I don't need audio hijack per se, because that takes a lot of like under the hood stuff that like they'll never allow on iOS. But if there was some kind of architecture where I can take my audio and decide exactly which app it goes to at which time, and have multiple apps being able to hear the same audio source at once.
I'd like to be able to just change the volume on an iOS or iPad device and have the appropriate volume change. Because he's confused what it's going to. Is it my HomePod? Is it my phone? Is it what? Why is there no sound? Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, what would you like to have on? What do you think is on the WWDC bingo card? If you think, just out of curiosity, if you have any thoughts.
What on what's definitely coming?
What? Well, okay. Aside from what's on the rumors, what do you want? What do you want to come?
I want?
Aside from the multi-audio thing.
I want a watch that doesn't depend on my phone. I think that would definitely be nice. Like I could literally get out of the box setup. I mean, now you can kind of do that for kids with the whole like setup from one iPhone. You get set up 5 different watches and like give them to people. But I just want the watch to be completely independent the way the iPhone eventually got away from the Mac. And I think this might be the year for it. It's the 10-year anniversary. It might be an interesting time to introduce something like that. It really depends on the hardware capabilities, I guess. But I want a reason to actually activate the cellular on my watch.
I've never done it either. I have one of them and I forget all the time. It has a little red ring.
It connects to my Wi-Fi and that's good enough. I'm never away from my iPhone, but like give me a reason to be away from my iPhone, right?
I need a reason to go outside and run.
Yeah. But mainly what
that'll get me out of the house to watch.
I'm trying to think like, improvements to Swift UI, like from a developer standpoint, I really want to see more of the UI kit elements that we have to do in UI view controller representable, like to be like, like we have a photo picker that's native Swift UI. Why don't we have a camera, module?
Right.
Things like that. And those will come along, but, and just more of those kinds of improvements. That's really all I'm looking for in terms of like the big announcements that people will care about. I think it's going to be dominated by these goggles, whatever the heck they are.
Whatever.
And that team, by the way, works here in Boulder, where I live.
Oh, really?
So some secrets?
It's the top secret Boulder headquarters that they have. That's like
if Joe knows anything, he's not going to be able to tell us anyway. Because then he'd have to kill us.
They are even more. We know better than to ask them. We hang out with some folks here at Apple every now. We don't bother asking them what they're working on, and they don't tell us what they're working on.
Smart.
We just they can't ever show us their phones because they're all constantly running some beta version of something. So we don't ask. They're like, oh yeah, so what was that notification you just got? But yeah, I think we'll finally see the fruition of that.
That'll be cool. Yeah,
with something. If I had one bingo, that's like a guarantee. It's going to be something in that arena. It's not going to be yet another demo on an iPad of AR.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with core data. But Swift version, so it vends structs instead of classes and no Objective-C. gobbledygook interface, so you can have all of the Swift struct and enum support and everything, and just be stored and retrieved. That's what I think a lot of people want. After
optionals that are actually
core
optionals,
optionals that none of the weirdness you have to deal with. Also, bring back the little graphical view. They got rid of that in Xcode. Is it like the little graphical core data view? It showed you like your table structure.
Oh yeah, they did get rid of that. I forgot about that. Yeah,
super useful.
Yeah.
Like, imagine it in my head now.
Yeah, I'm pretty all in on core data at this point. So yeah, any improvements they can do there, and anything they can do to Swiftify things and get out.
You can help me then, because I'm still not very good at core data.
I mean, is this the year? I don't know if I don't follow it really on the open source stuff, but is this the year we're going to get Foundation in Swift finally? I know they're working on that. Right?
Yeah, there was some announcement about that recently, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yes, I believe so. Aaron.
Yeah, they did announce that it's in Swift 5.9, I believe. Whenever that comes out.
And we are on. I
5.8.
thought we were on 7, but we're 8, right?
5.8 now.
All right, so
we're almost at 6.
Right.
6 is supposed to be the big one, right? They've been building up to 6 for the last couple of years.
Yeah,
very cool.
Is it on the roadmap, or is that 5.8? So, anyway, 5.8. I guess it'll basically be in the next version, 5.9, right? So
so dub probably,
Yeah,
so cool. Foundation.
Well, it won't necessarily coincide with WWDC. That's the interesting thing about Swift development, is that it happens as it happens, and we get like new versions of Swift mid-year. Which, by the way, I kind of like. I like that they're not putting everything at the in September anymore, like where half the stuff was ship broken. We're still getting some stuff that they promised us last year, just happening now, kind of stuff, and I don't mind that at all. I wouldn't mind if they just basically turn the announcements of like, here's iOS 17. Some of this will be out in 17.0, some of this will be out in 17.5.
What's it? I think in Swift UI, I think like the photo picker came out in like 16.4.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that, right?
So anything like that is fine with me. Like, just announce it, tell me what's coming, and then just let me know when it's coming.
Right.
But Swift improvements, all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I hear that they're really rethinking the whole publisher thing and state objects and that kind of thing, which. Yes. That needs a little bit of cleanup too. It's still confusing to me in Swift UI when I'm using binding versus state versus.
Daniel Steinberg has some videos on his YouTube channel where he goes through removing combine. I always want to say combine, but it's not a farm instrument. So combine, and where you're removing it from like a Swift UI. Implementation. So you end up with, all the Swift UI automatic updating UI and stuff, but no combine whatsoever. And then he teases at the end of his last video that he has an even cooler thing to talk about, but after WWDC.
Right.
Because like these are videos of like combine. The assumption is combine is going away.
Yeah.
And before I even really use it much besides the Swift UI stuff. But,
oh my goodness. I've done a contract where pretty much the entire app is completely written in combined.
It must be fun. Lots of syncs everywhere and maps and
syncs and dumps.
Is it dump is the word?
Dump is a word. Yeah.
Dump's one? Okay.
And it's not fun, I tell you.
I saw some video about like, here's how you do like a networking stack with a modern network stack, and it was like it was all combined stuff. I'm like, this is so simple. I'm like, what? It's like, it doesn't look simple at all.
It's like, it's debug this. How do I even know what's going on?
What's happening? Where do I put the code?
Yeah,
it's not that complicated, but still, it was like, this doesn't seem simpler than async await does.
Yeah, and there's a perfect example, right? Async await came and like everyone universally praised it because it is pretty damn awesome.
Because
right?
I as a C# developer for many years, like async await is not new in other languages, and it's as awesome in every language I've ever encountered it.
Right.
Just because it just lets you write code in a much more natural for humans way. Just one sequence of things, like go and do this and just wait then continue. It's like instead of like weird closures and like nested things everywhere.
Put it in this bar, and then it'll be there when it's there. And then
write a function signature that's like returns the thing I want, not like some weird closure around the thing that I want.
Even though, and then you forget to call the completion handler in one of your cases.
Like so inside baseball developer talk now. Now Joe is really a developer. He's just like going all in on the inside baseball. He knows our pain.
Lying.
Not lying at all. I remember the earlier days, Joe, when you were transitioning to developer life, developer world.
True.
Wow. And you were like, and you seem more more hesitant to get into developer talk. Now you're just like you're in the weeds with us.
That's right. Yeah, I don't have
one
opinions
of us.
still. It's funny. I still don't have strong opinions. So whenever I do code reviews with people, it's like, yeah, that looks good to me. Like,
it doesn't work. It's fine.
There's so many people that are like, they get angry because you want to put an empty line after your guard statements. I'm like, that's fine if that's the style.
That's what a linter's for. If you care about that on a project, just implement the rule in Swift lint or whatever, and just let it go.
Yeah, then you argue over the Swift lint.
I have to say, like, my current job, it's like it's a lot of rock and roll. Like a lot of rock and roll. I have no discipline whatsoever. Like, they just let the leash go, and I'm just like, tests? What are tests? What is this test? Yeah. Nobody does tests.
So it's like punk rock.
Like, I swear, like, it is so punk rock. If everybody looked at my code, they would probably want to like throw me out the window. It is just disgusting. And I
got too much enterprise development background, so I'm like, how do I design? Like, I'm like, how do I model this properly with protocol structs and enums? And like, that's what I was. I try to do.
You're doing that. I'm going. How do I get this particle effect? To show up.
That's my thing.
Well, do they want particle effect? No, they don't want it. I'm just putting it in there.
I just want it to pop.
I want that thing. Like all the things that you used to know me, Joe, for like really hating. Mm-hmm. I have turned to 180 now, and I'm all in on the horrible. I am just all in. It's like, let's make this zoom in, but not like the generic zoom. It's got to have like a little bit of spring, got a little jiggling effect in there. And it's like, why? It's like, well, we're trying to go for a metaphor. We're trying to get this nice. We want you to like feel like you're in a jungle.
It doesn't take like 15 hours of painstaking effort in UIKit to do. So you might as well.
Swift UI just allows for that level of obnoxiousness, and I embrace it. I'm that guy now.
I play with dampening curves for hours at a time until I get that animation bouncing exactly the way I want it to. Yeah.
You want that haptics? How do you want that to slap? You want something custom? Yeah, we could do that too. You want sound effects? Oh, nobody puts on sound? That's fine. Because nobody's going to hear it anyway. But that's okay. I'll put it in there just for that. It'll
be a nice bonus.
Accidentally, that's a bonus. They're like, it'll get them in trouble, but whatever. You want dark mode? Sure. Let's sneak that in there.
Dark mode's table stakes now.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, it should be.
Yeah, luckily Swift UI makes that stuff easier. But
yeah. So we should be wrapping up. Joe, if you can tell the audience, all the plugs, social media, how to get in touch with you, all that jazz.
I mean, I'm not really on social media. I got rid of Twitter when they got rid of third-party support. I was just like, okay, if I can't use Twitterific, I'm not going to use Twitter. That was finally my excuse to get rid of the last. I ditched Facebook over a decade ago. But and even Instagram, it just became all ads. I am on my
Joe lives in the 90s apparently.
Yes, I have my old-fashioned blog at joecieplinski.com.
He's got his MySpace.
Yeah. Joe C on micro.blog basically is the one place that I'm still hanging out a little bit. And there is a Mastodon kind of cross-posting thing happening there. So I do follow some people on Mastodon through micro.blog, which is kind of cool that Matt kind of opens that up a little bit. But yeah, and then the other thing is, if you happen to be listening to this and you live in the Boulder area, or you happen to be in the Boulder area, every third Wednesday we do get together. That's actually coming up as we're recording this very soon. We get together at a pizza place in town called Barchetta. We just hang out. We call it Boulder OS, or BOS for short. And that's sort of our monthly gathering that we do. And we hang out with like-minded folks. So if you happen to be ever visiting, feel free to make your plans that you're there on a third Wednesday. You can hang out with us. We're also doing a dub watching viewing party here in my complex. We're going to have a bunch of people over and just kind of on a slightly larger television than you might have at your house.
That doesn't sound public.
Some people have really big TVs in their home.
It sounds like a private gathering, though.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's open invitation. Anyone who's in the area or wants to fly in for the day or the week.
Nice.
We'll be watching videos all week, pretty much.
Do you have like a website for your Boulder OS?
Yeah, it should be. You
can give it to me afterwards. I'll put it in the show notes. But
yep. It's just boulderos.com.
Oh, nice. Boulderos.com.
Cool.
So
Very cool.
So you can check that out and find out about our WW watching party and stuff like that.
That's cool.
And
we're gonna do something. We'll probably be virtual though, because we don't have a cool
maybe
television.
we could just do a cross collab where
that's
we
right.
have a Zoom or something, and then you can just
Zoom you in.
put us like somewhere on the side, and we can all watch it together. But
last year I set up my espresso machine. That was a big hit. A lot of people came in and wanted to have a shot of espresso.
Oh my god, the coffee release notes of coffee.
Oh, jeez.
It was a pain in the butt. I remember you had to go and get like a grinder or something at one point. But you know what?
You guys broke our grinder within like 15 minutes.
It was so good. It was so great to be able to have like fresh coffee.
Yep.
Oh my god.
Nice.
We could talk to Joe for hours and hours and hours, but hopefully you'll grace us with your presence again in the future.
Yeah,
we continue.
It's a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on. It's been a long time since I did any kind of podcasting.
We miss you, Joe.
Yeah, I know, Joe.
I gotta get. I'll definitely be in the Philly area at some point soon. I would definitely have to check out.
Definitely let us know.
Very cool.
We'll hang and do something.
I'll take off, man. I'll come down. I'll find you.
We'll come down. Yeah, we'll have some ramen or something.
Yeah,
ramen.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna do the outro. So
it's good that you announced that, because I'm not sure people picked up
you can
on
cut
it.
that part out.
Just ended abruptly.
That's how I end my other podcast. I just kind of like end it.
This is where you're going to use Final Cut's pencil tool, where you just cut this part out and this part out. Making a stupid comment, you can just put that little note there. Well, that's all we have for today. You can learn more about Philly Cocoa at phillycocoa.org. There you'll find links to our Slack group, meetup schedule, and contact info. If you're feeling generous, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your podcast platform of choice is. And share us with all your developer friends. And one more thing. A programmer has a problem. He decided to use Java. He now has a problem factory.
Oh my god.
All right, here we go.
Also applies to C# too.
Why are assembly programmers always soaking wet?
Why?
I might have said this one. They work below the sea level.
Oh my god. Are these ChatGPT ones?
Yeah, I was going to say, are these the ChatGPT ones?
These are not. Surprisingly, no. That's how bad they are. But I did Google dad programmer jokes, so there you go. Only your dad would know these jokes. Two threads walk into a bar. The bartender looks up and yells, "Hey, I don't want any condition race like time last."
That's a definitely programmer joke. Oh my god.
Next time, good luck on your own developer journey. We will cheer for you always. It is just disgusting, and I love it.